Resolute, How We Humans Keep Finding Ways to Beat the Toughest Odds. You've been through hell, Benjamin Hall. Your first book, you laid it out in great detail. And you not only survived, you have really thrived. You're a man of great spirit, a man of family. Your wife has been the biggest supporter. You've been and you still are working at Fox. I know how much work is involved in writing a book. So, Benjamin Hall, tell us about this fantastic book, Resolute.
Well, Mark, last time you and I spoke, I'd just written the first book, and that was really about my experiences after I was injured in Ukraine. And I thought that I had gotten through the most difficult parts. I thought that when I got home again, that the hard parts were over. And I was totally wrong, Mark. The difficult moments arrive when you get home, when you no longer have doctors and physios and nurses. You don't have 24-hour care, and you have to take your injuries. You have to take everything that is holding you back, and you go home with that. And I was just amazed to see how hard that was for a while with my family and the pressures it put on that. And so I had another whole segment of having to get through that as well. And what I have learned, time and time again, is that every time you encounter a hurdle, you find ways through it. And that's what I try to write in this book, my own experiences, very openly, some of the tough times. But in each single case, I found that if you look at it closely, you focus your mind, you set yourself goals, just as you said, you don't just come through it, you thrive, you get stronger. And I'm very lucky to have reached a position now where, challenges don't upset me anymore. I see them as opportunities. And that, I think, is what I wanted to convey in the book. I wanted to pass that on to anyone else who's going through difficult times. And when I say difficult times, I don't mean injuries and prosthetics like mine. I mean, financial problems or family issues or anxiety. There are ways of getting through all of these, and I've tried to use my own experiences to convey that.
When you have the kind of experience you did, I mean, life-threatening, the physical effects, you lost friends, it also has an impact on you mentally, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely, and that was another battle as well. You have to, firstly, I had sort of traumatic brain injury, and I had to figure out a way of getting through that. And, I changed the way in which I prepare for things. I changed the way in which I address things, and I found a way to solve some of those problems. I write in the book about the flashbacks I have. What happened that day, the explosion, my friends and colleagues dying alongside me. I still go back to that moment. I still feel those, but that no longer upsets me. Those are things that happened in my life. Those are the burdens I have to carry. And you can go in two ways. You can let those crumble you, or you can take them and you can say, I'm going to go and try and live a better life because of it. I'm going to make those drive me. I'm going to make sure that I don't waste the second life I've been given. And that's how I've managed to get through the worst. And again, it reminds me not to take anything for granted. And so, yes, there are psychological issues. But again, you can find your way through those as well. And once you've solved those, then again, you are better than you were before.
And you talk about in the book kind of role changes or role reversals with your wife, that because of your physical condition and so forth, that you talk about this experience you had when somebody was at the door and you thought they were breaking in. Explain that.
Well, there were actually a couple of people who did break into my house, and I was just returned home from hospital, and it was the middle of the night at 2 a.m., and two people broke in downstairs, and they were robbing the house. Now, our dog started to bark, and it was my pregnant wife, Alicia. She jumped up and said, I've got to go downstairs. And I said, you've got to wait for me. You can't go. And she said, I'm not letting them get near the children. And she was the one who ran downstairs, screaming, shouting, flailing at them, and she chased the robbers away. But what a reversal that was. I was the man of the house. I was the person who was supposed to protect our household, protect my family, and I was unable to do that. I couldn't get my prosthetics on in time. I was still upstairs. And that was a bit of a hit that time, because I realized that what a reversal. My wife had to step in when I couldn't do something, and that one moment actually had, a bit of a hit on me. But, my wife is an incredible person who knows when roles reverse in some cases. There are things I can't do at home because of my injuries that she has stepped up and said, I'll do that. And I say, well, I will do something else that you used to do. And so we have balanced out what we can do and what we can't do. And that, I think, is a great relationship. And I got through this because of her and her strength.
When you look at what's going on now with Ukraine and Russia, and there's an effort by President Trump to try and bring this war to an end. And, initially it was very tough on Ukraine and Zelensky's response upset the president, the vice president, a lot of Americans. And then Russia, president, I think, behind the scenes has been pretty straightforward with Russia. He's trying to figure out how to do a minerals deal, which I think would be in the best interest of both countries in so many respects. And he's threatened Russia with massive sanctions if they can't figure out how to come to the table and so forth. What do you make of all this?
Look, first of all, I think that we are watching dialogue happen, and that is something we haven't seen in 3 years. And, we have to expect this will take some time. President Trump used what he had to bring Ukraine to the table, and Ukraine has agreed to an unconditional ceasefire. And now President Trump, Steve Witkoff, they are working with the Russians to bring them to the table as well. Now, look, the Russians think that they are doing better in this conflict, and they're playing harder to get, and they're not moving as quickly as the Ukrainians. But not only has President Trump threatened sanctions, we've also seen him in the last couple of days tell President Zelensky that he would look for Patriot missiles to defend Ukraine in Europe. We have seen that he didn't reimpose the Biden administration's policy of allowing Russia to use the U.S. payment system to sell its oil. That's going to have a big hit on Russia. So we are starting to see some action from President Trump. And I think the longer President Putin doesn't meet in the middle, then I think President Trump will have to push harder and harder. And that's what President Trump does. It's transactional. And, we're talking about a ceasefire right now. The big question is what a full-time peace deal will look like. But we're moving in a direction that we weren't moving in before. And I speak to people in Ukraine, and they want peace. And, you start negotiations on two very different sides. And in the end, both sides have to come and meet somewhere in the middle. We're at the beginning of that process, but it has at least begun.
Benjamin Hall, did you think you had this in you, that you could recover mentally, physically, that you could keep your life together, even though it's been very, very difficult, keep your family together? Have you been able to achieve things that you didn't think you would?
Yeah, it was always interesting because I've covered conflict for over 15 years, and I've seen people injured the way I was injured, and I've seen people lose their lives, and I always ask myself, what would it be like if it happened to me? How would I respond? Would I have the resilience? And you would never find out until it does happen to you. And then it did happen to me, and I have been immensely proud of how I handled this and how I managed to get through it. And what I have learned is that I think everyone does have that level of resilience inside them, but many people don't realize it. But when your back is up to the wall, when you have no other choice, you do find it, and it is inside everyone. And it was a learning curve, but I learned quite quickly. Even on my evacuation from Ukraine, it was this 10-hour brutal train ride with no pain meds, and I was barely alive. I learned even that early on that when the pain got too bad, that I was able to stop, focus, really concentrate, and try to bring that pain down. And it reminded me just how much the mind can control how you are feeling. And once I started to learn these lessons, I was able to use them time and time again. I knew I could recover. I knew I was going to be fine at some point. But again, it was the impact it would have on my family, my young children. And that, I think, is something I will always be working at. My eldest daughter is almost 10 years old at the moment. And I thought that, this was not going to be such a big issue for them. But just as because they were young when they found out. But already I'm starting to see if she gets older, moves into, 10, 11, she's starting to talk more and more about it. So I'm aware that this is something that will be with us forever. We will constantly be finding ways to change it. But I write in the book that adapting is one of the most important things you can do. When walls come up, you adapt. You find a way around them. You address them. You don't just be so hot-headed that you do it one way. You learn to get round and find new ways of doing things. And that was a great lesson that I learned.
Although it's hard to imagine, do you ever say to yourself, look at what some of these other people are going through. I can do this too.
Absolutely. I mean, I was very lucky that I was treated at the Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas. at one of these great facilities that treated so many of the soldiers injured in Afghanistan and Iraq. But what it meant was that at the end of my hospital bed, every day there was another veteran, someone else standing there saying, "Look at us, we've done it, you can do it." And that really helps you. And again, that's one of the reasons I wanted to write the book. Many people gave that to me, and I hope the book now passes that on to other people, because seeing other people go through tough things really makes you stand up and say, if they can do it, I can do it too.
Benjamin Hall, the book is Resolute, How We Humans Keep Finding Ways to Beat the Toughest Odds, and you're really trying to pass along to as many people as you can, not just your experiences, but advice on what to do when your back is against the wall and so forth and so on. And this book is superb. This book does exactly that. You can get it at Amazon.com, any major bookstore. I hear you're going back to London. Let me ask you about that. Not that that's in the book. London has changed a lot, hasn't it? England's changed a lot. I mean, we used to go there maybe 25, 30 years ago. You could walk in London. You could cross, the Thames on the bridge there. He could do it at 3 a.m. There was nothing to worry about. Now I hear it's not exactly that way. Is that right?
In a big way. I have 4 children, 4 daughters at home, and it is a concern to us when they are out and about in the streets. The knife crime is rising. To be honest, the country and the city doesn't look like it used to when I was younger and when I was originally living there. It is changing. And look, there are a number of issues and reasons for that. Look, immigration has changed the way Europe looks. I mean, multiculturalism opened its arms, but it never encouraged people to embrace the culture or learn the language or adopt the faith. And, there are parts of London that feel totally foreign. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with having people from all over the world there. But if they don't...
They need to assimilate.
You have to assimilate. And so you are seeing divisions growing. And look, frankly, I'm a proud American. My father was American. I grew up between the two countries, and I still talk to my wife quite often saying, what do you think? I think we may be moving. Not only because of the way that the city looks and because of security, but, I've been traveling around America over the last year doing this series for Fox Nation, looking at communities that have been hit hard but rebuild themselves. And there is a community spirit in America. There is this immense sort of quality, a go-get-em quality, meritocracy, where you are rewarded for the good you do and for the hard work you put in, that I don't see the same of in the UK. And so, it's going to be a big question for me and my family as we look at the years ahead.
There really is something to be said, I guess, being an American, about the Yankee. There really is something to be said about the American spirit. And I just hope our spirit isn't blown out for the same reasons you're having issues in England. We have them in the United States and other reasons, too. Because that American spirit is so important. That's what distinguishes us from everybody else. Anyway, I was curious about that. So, folks, get the book. It's a great book, Resolute, How We Humans Keep Finding Ways to Beat the Toughest Odds by Benjamin Hall. You're just a fantastic young man. I've never met you. Hopefully one day I will. And I appreciate all you're doing. God bless you, my friend.
And to you too, sir. Thank you very much.
Be well. Be well. What a remarkable young man, Mr. Producer.